going on, guys? Welcome back to my F122 MyTeam career mode. In this one, we have a very interesting prospect to start out, as we are reached the point in the season where we get to potentially renegotiate the contract with our teammate. Fittipaldi has not really lived up quite to the expectations that we had for him at the beginning of the season, so we are actually going to start out this episode by doing a bit of shopping around the drivers market and try and get an idea of what we are going to be doing. And who do we find but Oscar Piastri, who is currently undergoing quite a bit of drama around in real F1 circles, but here actually compared to Fittipaldi, he actually turns out to be quite a bit of an upgrade, especially now that we currently have the personnel upgrades and the facilities actually working correctly. We see some potential to get a very good upgrade and actually save a bit of money compared to Fittipaldi. And so we are going to go ahead and make an offer to Piastri to replace Enzo Fittipaldi as our teammate here in the rest of this 2022 season, as well as going into next year. And we send over our offer, and he ends up accepting it. And so now we have a new teammate as Oscar Fittipaldi joins MrDakota0 Racing for the rest of this season and the foreseeable future. We're hoping that his personnel upgrades will be able to help him develop, as well as give us some better results as we continue to move through this season. It's going to be a bit of a learning curve, but we are going to do it anyway. Now that we are making some decisions on whether or not to attend a powertrain meeting, we're going to try and make the best decision we can. And looking at the season so far, the morale really is going to be really hit or miss. And so by attending this meeting, we could potentially make some good grounds, but at the end of the day, we end up declining in order to try and best maximize our time. So as we get ready for the French Grand Prix this weekend, we are going to go ahead and prepare ourselves the best we can to head to Paul Ricard to try and make our way around the French track and these bright, colorful lines. As we head into our best lap here of Q1 here around Paul Ricard, we are going to do our best to try and solidify our position and make it out of Q1. As you see, we currently sit in P14 on the session. While we are currently safe, we do not think it'll be safe for long, and so we are really looking to try and make the most out of this final run on this qualifying session. We are running on a fresh set of tires, as we are currently on our third lap of this session, so we are really trying to make the most out of the fresh rubber as we are coming around the full speed right-hander. We are following around and hopefully getting a bit of a tow from the car in front, trying to do everything we can to save even every microsecond that we can as we make our way around the final few turns here at Paul Ricard. We currently find ourselves about 3/10 of a second up. We're slowly making our way, trying not to ruin Ocon's lap ahead of us, but at the same time trying to make sure that we are getting the best out of it we can as we round the final corner. And we will improve our time by just about 4/10 of a second, and we will successfully make our way into Q2 with that. So thankfully, once again, we are able to just squeak through in P15 around Paul Ricard into Q2, and we are going to move on. And as we get to our second qualifying session here in Q2, you can see the weather has taken quite a bit of a change, and we do find ourselves on the chopping block as we have really been unable to put in a solid lap so far. And we are going to be doing everything we can to try and make some major improvements, as we will head down this back straight, doing everything we can, trying not to mess up the chicane, as it had given us problems all weekend so far, as we find ourselves about 2/10 up so far on our personal best. We know we have a long way to go if we are going to ever have a chance of getting out of Q2 in this one, but unfortunately we are just having a really hard time staying on the line, hitting our braking points, and really struggling with being as smooth as we kind of need to be. And you can see here that just the racing line gets away from us. Even though we do find ourselves about half a second up, we only can look at all the time we are potentially losing around these final few corners here at Paul Ricard, as we are still really working and fighting against this car. We set it up as best we could for the weekend, but as we round the final turn, we will be just about a second up and we will see if it's good enough here as we near the 4-minute mark left in qualifying. We've been about 1.1 seconds and we move up, and we are going to do everything we can, and I'll show it all here in real time, that we try and do everything we can to get back out and once again try and ensure that we try and get the best time as possible. And as we come out for what would hopefully be our final flying lap, really to try and secure our spot into Q3, we find ourselves actually just moved down to P11, and it's unfortunate as you look in the top right hand corner, as we are going to be unable to make the start finish line, and unfortunately we are just out of we are just outside of Q3 as we finish up in P13, unable to get a final lap in. That's really unfortunate, as we really had a good shot of improving again, but unfortunately we couldn't able to make the line, and we finish in P13 on the session. But nonetheless, we are excited to get going here in France. We know that we have a lot of ground to make up, and we know it's a circuit that is relatively simple and straightforward, and so if you can make up some positions, you can really do some damage. And so as we head towards race Sunday, we are going to do everything we can to mentally and physically prepare for as a team.
Welcome along then to France, one of the great racing meccas, host of the world famous Tour de France, and widely thought of as giving birth to the art of motor racing in the late 1800s. How far we've come since then as this year's race gets underway. It's time, of course, for the French Grand Prix. 6 lefts and 9 rights give us a total of 15 corners here at the circuit Paul Ricard, and a lap covers an overall distance of 3.6 miles. Average speeds will be somewhere in the region of 142 miles per hour, and they'll be maxing out on the Mistral Straight at around 205 miles per hour. Before we begin, let's take a quick look at the grid lineup for today's race. An immense lap from Carlos Sainz yesterday puts him in pole position, and Max Verstappen lines up alongside. Looking at the rest of today's grid, we have Leclerc, Perez, Lando Norris, and Hamilton, Magnussen, Mick Schumacher, Tsunoda, and Daniel Ricciardo. The rookie, Fernando Alonso, Pierre Gasly, and Russell, Joe, Albon, Esteban Ocon, and Oscar Piastri, Bottas, Latifi, Stroll, and Sebastian Vettel starts from the back of the grid. That's it then, it's time to go racing as we head down trackside for today's race. And a warm welcome to Natalie Pinkham, who's beside me in the commentary box today. Let's have a chat about McLaren. What do you make of their performance so far this season?
Well, the atmosphere within the team seems very positive at the moment. Everyone seems like they're in great spirits and having a lot of fun doing what they do. And that has definitely contributed to the performances we've seen.
Let's begin our formation lap here around Paul Ricard. BC, we actually get bumped up into P11 to start here thanks to some grid penalties to those around us. So we just start outside the points here, and we are going to be looking at doing everything we can to make a good start here and try and put ourselves in another good position to succeed here around the French Grand Prix track of Paul Ricard. We are going to do everything we can to, as I say every episode, avoid damage, really try and take care of the tires and not overwork them too hard as I am so wont to do. But I do feel like we've gotten a little better at our tire management as the season has gone on, and I really think it will come back to benefit us down the line. But for here, as we line up on our final grid positions, we are about to get underway here in Paul Ricard in France for the French Grand Prix. It is going to be hopefully a fun day around this French Paul Ricard track. As we know, in real life, Paul Ricard is potentially leaving us, so it'll be fun to potentially go around one more time as we go to 5 red lights here in Paul Ricard. The lights are out and we are away here in France as we actually get quite a slow start here. You see Alonso, who absolutely just does one on the inside of us, as Pierre Gasly also takes one on the inside. We actually go around the outside of turn 1, which actually sets up really nicely to take Ricciardo and the McLaren on the inside. And what a opportunity we have here. We now find ourselves in the top 10, chasing down the front pack as the two Haas of Kevin Magnussen and Mick Schumacher battle in front of us, and we are ever hoping to catch one of them sleeping and hopefully potentially make a move, but unfortunately for us, neither of them do, as Mick ends up settling in front of Kevin. We actually get a pretty terrible run out of these first couple of corners, and unfortunately for us, the AlphaTauri of Pierre Gasly pulls up alongside us. Thankfully, no DRS yet, but we do find ourselves, we push him slightly off the racing line, we get back, and thankfully for us, he ends up dropping out and dropping back down behind to get on the racing line as much as possible for him. And so we are going to continue to now chase down the two Haas's of Mick Schumacher and Kevin Magnussen as we head down the first full speed right-hander. And this is where we need to make up some time here in the more curvy turn-filled section of this final sector around Paul Ricard, trying to settle in and try and do what we always do, which is make some pretty daring moves that'll either be the most major risk reward for us as we come to finishing our first lap here, hopefully settling into a little bit of a pocket here in the top 10, trying to get within that magical second mark of the Haas's in front of us, trying not to fall back too far before we can truly take advantage of DRS, especially with now the McLaren of Daniel Ricciardo behind us running in 10th. And so as we move on to lap 2, we are going to be doing everything in our power to continue to catch up. As we move forward here onto lap 4, we actually see that Daniel Ricciardo was able to get by us with the help of some DRS earlier on the laps, as DRS was enabled, and we now are being attacked by the inside, similarly to lap 1 by Yuki Tsunoda, and we thankfully give him a little bit of space on the inside, but we'll have the racing line here on the inside of this chicane, and be able to get a good jump on this exit as we make the run down to this full speed right-hander, trying to hold off the AlphaTauri of Yuki Tsunoda, as well as the now appearing Mercedes of George Russell, who got a bit of a terrible start and is currently running in P12. As we continue to move forward here on the action, we are still following the McLaren of Daniel Ricciardo, and we're going to hopefully get a good run here down the pit straight with some DRS, trying to do everything we can to increase the gap to the AlphaTauri behind us, but also stay within reach of Daniel Ricciardo and the McLaren ahead. As we actually take a bit of a look around the outside, unfortunately we do run a bit wide, a little too wide. Unfortunately, we are unable to get a really good run as Daniel gets the racing line and absolutely leaves us in the dust. As we head through the S section here, coming on to this back straight, we thankfully were able to make up a little bit of time, where we're hoping and praying that we're able to stay within DRS here at the detection point to try and get advantage here down this back straight and make it not necessarily run at Daniel, but enough to stay within distance and hopefully being able to make a move later on in the race. We don't want to get left behind too much, because if we were left behind at this point, there is going to be, a second plus gap ahead of us to Ricciardo with that 2.3 second gap behind. And as long as we can stay within the the distance of Daniel Ricciardo, he'll help drag us along and increase that gap as best we can. But we are riding that line very finely, as he has about a 9/10 of a second lead on us here as we enter the final sector here. We are actually not doing too badly. I think we're trying to settle in as best we can here around Paul Ricard, coming into about the quarter mark of the way through this race. Very soon we are going to be doing everything we can to try and stay within the points here. We do find ourselves in a nice little bubble, even though we wish we were a bit closer to Daniel here. We're doing everything we can to stay within DRS and try and make up some time. But with that said, as long as we are avoiding the rest of the pack, which is now the Mercedes of George Russell, we're doing everything right. But unfortunately, the Mercedes, as we know, is a bit of a better car here. As we move forward a couple of laps only, as George Russell has absolutely had a fantastic couple laps here and is absolutely putting the pressure on us here down this back straight. We're going to deploy as much ERS as we dare, but that Mercedes is just going to have far too much potential from us. We're going to settle in behind. We're going to try and save some ERS here, and we are going to do everything we can to try and get a tow from George Russell and try and do everything we can to capitalize on any potential mistakes. And we're actually going to look at this as an opportunity to see Russell try and hold up Daniel Ricciardo as best as he can, hoping those two will fight a little bit and potentially slow each other down, allowing us to kind of hang on to the back and take advantage of any mistakes that may cause here. But nonetheless, we are nearing about the 1/3 mark here around Paul Ricard, and we are still in a prime position to try and take advantage as best we can, especially as we see the different tire strategies that are going on, with Daniel Ricciardo and McLaren going on the hards to start, so he will go a little bit longer than us as we start on the mediums, as well as George Russell. And so it'll be interesting to see how the tire strategies play out as we continue around Paul Ricard here in France, and we do find ourselves still within DRS of George Russell, thankfully, hoping once again that he will just drag us along and we can continue to be in position to fight the best we can. Unfortunately, our car performance is just really starting to show here, especially on these higher speed sections of Paul Ricard. We are just doing everything we can to try and keep the racing line, take the fastest lines we can with our car, and this is what we are hoping for. We're hoping that Daniel Ricciardo will hold up George Russell just enough to allow us to stick to the back of the pair and potentially try and stay in the race as best we can. As here on the back straight, the Mercedes will absolutely get a run on the McLaren of Daniel Ricciardo, and we will, not necessarily be able to keep up in a straight line, but thankfully we were able to get DRS, which will help keep that cushion behind us to the fast approaching Daniel Ricciardo, and the Fernando Alonso rather, as George Russell and Daniel Ricciardo start to tussle a little bit, and we actually see an opportunity here to make a run on Daniel Ricciardo. Thank you, George Russell. That is exactly why we needed to do. As we actually take a bit of a look up the inside here on the fast right-hander, we do back off just a little too much. I think we actually could have taken George Russell there, but we will probably wisely back out, now running in 10th, as we are hoping now to continue to just hold on to the back of the Mercedes as long as we can, as we now have the McLaren behind. Man, it would have been very, very nice to get that run on Russell, but unfortunately I wasn't sure how much room he was going to leave us, and we didn't need any unnecessary incidents coming around the full speed right-hander there as we entered the third sector of Paul Ricard. But now we find ourselves back in the points, and we've actually opened up quite a nice gap behind, and I'm not sure Daniel Ricciardo actually got DRS on us there, and it does not look like it is, looking at the delta times here. So as we get ever nearer to the halfway point of this race, we thankfully to the Mercedes of George Russell, we are actually carving out a bit of a cushion here to those behind. Unfortunately, the Mercedes is absolutely leaving us in the dust, and so at this point we are hoping to keep it. But as we move forward a couple of laps, we do find, unfortunately for us, that Fernando Alonso has actually made his way up as we enter the pits, and hoping to kind of make up some places. So Fernando Alonso kind of definitely came out of nowhere, and that Alpine, as much as we say we would love to be on par with Alpine, we do find ourselves near the bottom of the R&D chart here, and so we're going to do everything we can to get a good pit stop here and potentially overtake Alonso in the pits, along with hopefully keep our position as best we can. So as we get an optimal turn in here, a 2.4 second stop, and unfortunately a slow release because Alonso was coming down the pit lane, and we had to unfortunately let him go. But as we move forward here to lap 15, only 12 laps of this race remaining, we are moving back up into P11, and we are looking at Fernando Alonso ahead of us as our only obstacle here between us and points here in France, and we are just absolutely going balls to the wall, trying to catch the Alpine of the now in real life 41-year-old Fernando Alonso. And this is going to be a tough challenge as we only have 12 racing laps left, and we are looking at another points finish for our team, and that would be absolutely amazing. As we thankfully get DRS here down the back straight, we're going to be deploying as much ERS as we dare, as we are also trying to hold as much in reserve as possible for later in the race should it come to that. But thankfully we are finally getting a bit of a handle on this circuit of Paul Ricard, a little slow coming out of the chicane, but thankfully we are still within the magical distance between us and Fernando Alonso, and to get a bit of a tow down the back straight. And as we enter the final sector here on lap 18, moving forward again, we do find ourselves still behind the Alpine of Fernando Alonso, and it did get a little boring here. But with that said, we weren't making any unnecessary moves, really trying not to jeopardize our race as best as possible, trying to just continue to be in position should something happen. And thankfully here we actually get a really good run down the opening straight. We make a move to the inside, and we actually overtake Alonso here, kind of slowing him down just enough that we're able to move through and move back up into the points here in P10. He actually gets a pretty terrible restart off of that move, and we do find ourselves running in P10 again. But that if you believe that will be the last we see of Fernando Alonso, you will be incorrect here, as he is absolutely probably not enjoying that overtake I made on him, and he will absolutely be coming back to us on this back straight. We move to the left here to try to break the toe as best we can and potentially try and move him off the racing line as much as we can. Thankfully, we are able to hold him off just on this back straight, but he does find himself on our rear bumper again as we head down this back straight here. Thankfully, no DRS down this back straight, but it will move into the fast right-hander, and we are trying to hold off Fernando Alonso. And I believe this final sector should allow us to kind of keep him behind, but that pit straight is coming sooner rather than later, and if we can get a couple of good exits on these corners, we can try and once again build up enough of a cushion that he won't get a good run at us like we did on him just the lap before down this opening straight. Unfortunately, we get a couple of bad entries and exits on these corners, and he is able to kind of hover around that, you know, striking distance here, especially as we come through. Looking at the final right-hander back to the pit straight, and he finds himself about a half second back, well within DRS, and we are going to have a very tough time on our hands here trying to hold off Fernando Alonso here. We move as much as we dare trying to break the toe, but he finds himself right on our bumper. Thankfully, it wasn't enough space to overtake us on the pit straight, and so we actually think we might have a bit of a good time, but he is right on our tail here as we head to this little S section. He actually cuts the entire corner and then actually just absolutely almost takes us out after this S section. And what an absolutely horrific display as Fernando Alonso apparently gets off scot-free, completely cutting the corner with the overtake. And I'm at this point hoping and praying that his little contact coming off of that move didn't damage us. But as we move forward here to lap 20, I'm still wondering how he was able to cut an entire corner of the track to overtake and how he was allowed to get away with that. And now here I'm fuming at this point because I feel like I had run a very clean race up into this point and had actually managed to do everything right and fully deserved to be in P10. And the fact that he wasn't instructed by the game to give the position back is absolutely wild to me. And at this point, I'm trying to do everything I can not to just absolutely punt the 41-year-old Alonso into the wall here, as this is a point in the race where, as you can see, tire wear is really starting to catch up to us, that I have to try and decide, am I going to actually make a run at Alonso here, or do I need to start thinking about saving my tires for the end of the race where we can potentially make one final push? And I think I was almost speechless at this point still at how he was able to actually do that. But thankfully we actually, with Norris pitting here, we actually move up into the points without having to overtake Alonso. But we do find ourselves with an opportunity down the inside once again on that opening straight, and we are once again going to be moving down towards this same corner, and thankfully we're able to cover off Alonso enough to keep him from cutting the corner once again and re-overtaking us off the track. It should have been penalized the first time, but thankfully we are able to cover him off. And now with 6 laps left in this race, not including the one we're on, as we move to break the toe here down this back straight, we are doing everything we can to fight Fernando Alonso as well as the rest of the universe, because apparently Fernando Alonso in this game, at least around the French Grand Prix track, maybe it's the fact that he's in the Alpine and the French brand just really just, you know, maybe the PayPal account or whatever they use over in Europe is fresh open to the race director from Alpine executives, as Fernando Alonso, I'm going to continue to go on about it, fully cuts the chicane there, that little S-bend, and just completely overtakes us off the track, as once again coming down towards this infamous portion of the track, we see he actually dies on the inside and takes it even worse. Fernando Alonso overtakes us off the track once again, probably even worse at this point than he did the first time. Codemasters, what's going on? These AI are completely just cutting corners and getting away with it, as he now finds himself almost 3/4 of a second up on us because of that. At this point, I'm absolutely boiling over. I am absolutely taking everything I can. If we were running in 11th versus 10th for Alonso, I absolutely would have punted Fernando Alonso into the wall so hard he would have been gone for the rest of the season. But since we were looking at any points whatsoever, I have to somehow try and find my cool with 5 laps left in this race, having absolutely been completely screwed over by the game, allowing Fernando Alonso to completely and utterly cut the same corner multiple times in this race and get away with it. What is happening? What are we doing? But nonetheless, we are continuing on. We are here. It has happened, and we have to find a way to push down those feelings and try to make another run here as we actually get a decent run out of this final corner down the pit straight, where it's happened every time since. We're going to try and get the slipstream as well as DRS down this opening straight, trying to not use ERS if we can, as we fully and 100% take one out of Fernando Alonso's book there and completely just cut that first corner, because if he can do it, why can't I? As we can see, the FIA decides that we deserve a warning, but however many times Fernando Alonso can do it, apparently doesn't require much intervention at all. But nonetheless, we get the move done on Alonso, and we actually do enough potentially to almost get him out of DRS, the DRS distance here. Unfortunately, he does get DRS coming here down the back straight. We try and break the toe as much as we can. He thankfully does not move out of the way as Kevin Magnussen drops out, and we are looking at 4 laps of absolute defensive masterclass potentially as we try and hold on to P8 ahead of Fernando Alonso. And now actually Pierre Gasly is making an appearance here, who is currently running in P10, and we have another moment here where I'm hoping that the two of them could potentially start fighting and really try and slow each other down, now that I have a full, almost 7 seconds ahead to Mick Schumacher, who's having a fantastic season, by the way. And I'm hoping that the two of them behind will fight each other enough, and with the free air I have ahead, will allow me to kind of move and break away from the rest of the pack behind. As Fernando Alonso unable to get past me so far, I really honestly debated on trying to potentially and on purpose slow up Fernando Alonso, especially coming out of this last corner, trying to make sure that those two are close enough to fight and potentially give Alonso something to think about, as it appears to work as this down this back opening straight. We don't see them make quite as much ground as they would have, at least where we would expect, as we were coming around that final turn. So you can see that Gasly and Alonso are now actually fighting, pushing themselves further and further back away from me, and this was exactly what I needed. A bit of a bubble here, a bit of clean air to kind of cool down my emotions, as we are still absolutely fuming from the Fernando Alonso corner cutting scandal that happened not but a few laps ago. But as we move here onto the final lap, we can see that we are once again still trying to hold on to the best that we can, but the bubble has held up as Max Verstappen comes home to win the French Grand Prix, just as he did in real life. And at this point, we are just trying to be as smooth as possible and bring it home, as Pierre Gasly, who has overtaken Alonso now, is trying to make a bit of a run. But for us, we are just trying to bring it home nice and smooth, playing with that full second gap that we have, and we also have plenty of ERS to deploy at our disposal that we're saving up for the last few laps here as Alonso and Gasly were fighting. But as we round the final corner, we will once again come home to finish in P8. Here in our F1 22 MyTeam career in this first season, we have absolutely had a string of fantastic results, and we are absolutely thrilled that we're able to keep the momentum going as we get in the points once again and continuing to build on our results. We are going to keep fighting and keep building on these results, and hopefully Piastri, now that he's signed his first contract, will be able to get on board here after he gets in and takes advantage of some of our new facilities that are actually working thanks to a recent update by Codemasters. So as we finish here around Paul Ricard, congratulations to Max Verstappen on his win here in France. Carlos Sainz comes home in P3, and it's actually a Red Bull 1-2 as Sergio Perez comes home in second. So it's going to be a celebratory day in the Red Bull garage as the Red Bulls get a solid 1-2 here in France. And we're still chasing our first podium, or we're honestly still chasing the best result we've ever had, as I believe we still haven't finished higher than 8th in any particular race. But we know our time will come as we are continuing trying to carry our momentum forward off of another points finish, and we know that we will leave France happy. As the champagne falls on the podium, we are finally calmed down from our Fernando Alonso debacle, as he is I even recording this voiceover, I am still very hot about that. But nonetheless, we finished here in P8 behind Mick Schumacher in the Haas and just ahead of Pierre Gasly in the AlphaTauri. And Fernando Alonso ends up coming home and rounding out the top 10, getting the single points
What a performance.
for Alpine here in France. Unfortunately, Esteban Ocon just finishes just outside the points, so the Alpine, the French team, will finish with a single point only here in France. But nonetheless, we see Lewis Hamilton gets fourth and Charles Leclerc pulls out the top 5. We hold on to our P11 standings just behind Daniel Ricciardo in the driver's standings. Only 7 points behind the Australian though, so we are definitely still within striking distance of the top 10 in the driver standings, and we will definitely be doing what we can to make that push as soon as we can. But for now, we will be happy here in P11 getting our another few points. We may not necessarily be fighting for the World Drivers' Championship, as Charles Leclerc is absolutely at this point still just running away with it. A full 60 something on, what is that, 67 points? Yeah, 67 points up on Max Verstappen in P2, and Carlos Sainz isn't even that far behind Max Verstappen himself. So this World Drivers' Championship is looking to be a bit of a runaway for the Ferrari driver from Monaco, but it could still be interesting as Max Verstappen, Carlos Sainz, and Lewis Hamilton are all and Sergio Perez all well within each other distance wise, that the back half of this season could potentially cause some fireworks. But nonetheless, as we move forward onto the next weekend, we continue to remain focused on what we have to look forward to. As we take a look at the constructor standings, we do find ourselves still in P7, still well off of the 6th position of the Alfa Romeo, and actually well within striking distance of Alpine as well. One really good weekend, we could find ourselves in a potential battle for P6 in the constructors. We will be doing whatever we can to make that happen. But for now, we are going to be completely happy with our 4-point finish here in France as we move forward. Check out our rivalry breakdown. We actually end up beating Daniel Ricciardo this weekend, and we'll actually move up into level 10 driver acclaim. Thankfully, we are continuing to make some pretty good strides, getting a good jump on P11. Unfortunately, unable to qualify P15 or better for both of us, but nonetheless, I'm sure Piastri will come around soon enough. But for now, that'll do it in this one, and I'll see you guys in the next one.